Welcome to today's class. I know in the last class we talked about how to upload, how to work with Express and how to use Express to create routes, how to split um, your file, right, into different folders and how to export and import files. We looked at that and then we created a simple API that didn't use a database. And we noticed that each time we crashed the database each time we crashed the API or the backend and we started it again, it lost all the data we trying to we created. Okay, and that will lead us to trying to understand what would be a possible solution to fix that. And one of the possible solutions to fix that would be to use a database, right? To use a database, and then uh, MongoDB is one of the very popular databases that is out there, right? And MongoDB is a uh, NoSQL database, and I will explain what that means in a bit. So then we also talked about working with then we also talk about authentication, and we'll see what authentication means and why it is important. Okay, so let's start with what is SQL and what is NoSQL. So SQL is short for the abbreviation, and it means structured query language, right? So SQL means structured query language. Some people call it SQL. Some people call it SQL. It means structured query language. And structured query language means that um, it has a structure to, or it has schema, right? To, or how do I put it? It uses schema at the database level, right? So the schema gives it a rigid structure on how data is supposed to be. For example, if you have a database that has username, email, password, and something changes on your application, you need to also synchronize that schema change to the database. So which means if maybe it was before it was email, username, password, right? And then if there is now full name, username, email, and password, you need to sync that change with the back end, or sorry, with the database, right? With an SQL database for it to understand that, okay, there's this change in the schema, and okay, this is what you should be looking out for next time you want to save a data or you want to update data. But then there is a little bit of issue to that, which means there's always going to be a very rigid kind of structure in terms of how the database works, right? And there are different types of data. Some are actually structured, some are semi-structured, and some are not even structured at all. And there is a need for a database, right? Or to have a kind of database. So, so we have structured data, semi-structured data, and unstructured data. So let me give an example. If you are registering on a website, right? There are certain fields that are compulsory. You are like, okay, you must supply this, you must supply this, you must supply that, you must supply this before you can register on this website, and you must supply all of them. But then, so that kind of data it has a very definite structure. It must follow this particular sequence, right? Some you declare some things to be optional, things not to be optional, and the rest, right? But then let's look at when you're posting on Facebook, for example. you're posting a picture on Facebook, or sorry, you're making a post on Facebook, for example, or any other social media platform. Sometimes you tag someone to be posted. Sometimes you put pictures. Your picture can be 20. Sometimes you put sometimes you make a write-up and put picture. Sometimes you only post picture alone. Sometimes you just post only full stop. Uh, you see where I'm going with this. There is no Facebook, for example, doesn't make use or doesn't make it compulsory that anytime you want to post, you must have a picture. You must have this so and so number of characters. You must tag one person. That's so there is a relaxed kind of um, um, enforcement or structure there, right? And there should be a database that handles that or can accept that kind of structure, right? And another quality, so a NoSQL database is an example of a kind of database that doesn't enforce that structure. At least it doesn't enforce it at the database level, right? It can enforce that structure at any other level, but when it comes to how the database works, it's not going to, the database doesn't actually know a schema that, oh, okay, it must have first name, have last name and all those stuff and all those stuff. Like it's the application, your API, it just enforces the schema or the rule, right? And you can also use Mongo database without any form of rule or schema. That's anyhow the person wants to save his data, he can just save it like that, no issue. And some people might be asking, so between Postgres, so Postgres is an example of a SQL database. We have SQLite is an example of SQL database. We have MySQL, still the same. MariaDB is still under um, SQL databases that enforce SQL. Then Mongo database is an example of a NoSQL, a NoSQL database. And of course, I say the NoSQL database doesn't enforce any rigid structure for its data. Okay, so that's what I have to say about both of them. And then today we are starting with MongoDB. Then next class we are going to look at how Postgres works, and we are going to look at how to use something called or a package called Prisma. So Prisma is a very popular package used for both SQL and NoSQL databases, and we'll see how we can use it in our next class. So then we move to authentication. What is authentication? Right? You say, yeah, okay. So in real life, let me give an example. Okay, before I give an example, let me define it. Authentication is the process of proving to someone or to a platform, for example, that you are who you say you are. Okay? You are who you say you are. If you notice, the first thing they ask you is, what is your email? Or what is your username? You say you're the person with this username. Prove to us that you're the one that's with this username. Tell us something that only you know for us to believe that you're the one that owns this username. So if you tell us that thing and we check and that thing is true, we then grant you access. It's as simple as that. That's what authentication is actually. So when you say you're the son of so and so and so person, for example, in real life, and they say, so they now ask you a question that only pertains to maybe that family or that person, and then you're able to answer it well. They can now believe that, okay, you say you're who you say you are. That is exactly what authentication is. Being able to prove that you're who you say you are, right? Or let's leave humans, like if you're liking it to a product, it's like saying, proving that maybe this product is from the right source or this product is original and it's not fake, right? Right, and to prove that, you have to know something that only the authentic owner of that particular uh, uh, product or the authentic owner of that particular account can tell. For example, a password. You give a password and then that password proves that, okay, you actually are the owner of this account. Okay, so then let's see how we can modify what we wrote in the other, in our task. That's to do projects. Let's see how we can modify it to work with a database instead of just um saving it in an array. So let's go back to VS Code. Let's go back to VS Code. Let me share that screen. Okay, we are finally here. I hope you guys can see my screen. Everybody can see my screen and there is no hiccups. Right. Okay. And let me just go back this briefly. In our last class, we created and splitted our um our project into different uh files, right? And folder. So remember that our app.js just has where we imported Express, then we imported our to-do router, which we'll look at. Then we imported our required config, this .env. So this .env makes it possible for you to work with your environment variables, whether locally or when you push this code online. Then we initialize Express here, and then we decided to use Express JSON middleware. And remember that I said this middleware is used to intercept and pass the body of requests. So if you make a post request and the request has a payload or a body that is JSON, it is this line that is going to process that entry. Then we talked about the to-do route, which is where it would be like part of this would be how your route will begin. It will always begin with /to-do if you are sending a to-do or a request to do. Okay, so let me remove this. Then the next thing is you create a server, right? That listens to or that listens to Express, right? Oh, sorry, did I say listens to Express? That listens to requests coming in, right, from port 3000, and then handles those requests. So that's why you're using app.listen. Listen is used to listen, to create a server that can listen to requests on this particular port. Okay, so we've gotten that out of the way. Then the next thing we did is we go to our to-do route. So we go to our router and we created this router. We make sure that this router had okay, first we import our Express. We create a router from to-do router. So this is like saying we are going to create routes, right? And then we are going to export that route to be used by our app.js, right? Or by this to-do route here. So we are saying anytime we make a request here, use this file that contains all those routers, like check for the list of routers that are inside this to-do router anytime we send in a request to do. So it will check here for this to-do router to see which of the routers here, right, is concerned with that request you're sending. Okay. Then we also talked about how to send email, right? So you create your transport layer and then you export it, and then where you want to send your email. For example, when we create a new to-do, you import the transporter here. After importing it, you write your email, or you write the from, which is you, the to, which is who you're sending it to, subject and the HTML or text you want to send. And remember that I said that these two, okay, if I didn't say it, these two, if you don't want it to be static could be maybe the email you fetch from your database. You could fetch an email from the database and send an email to that address. You can fetch an address, right, from a database and send an email to that address. So what we want to look at is, remember that we were using an array to hold our to-do, which isn't, should I say, usable or scalable in the general sense. So let's see. First of all, since we're using MongoDB, we want to do npm install mongoose, right? Mongoose. So mongoose is not the only ORM or ODM, right? And someone will be asking, I know someone might be asking, what is ODM? What is ORM? Okay, ORM is called, or the full meaning of ORM is object resource mapper. Then ODM is object documents mapper. Okay. And what's the usefulness of an ORM or an ODM? Now, an ORM is used, or an ORM is used to, okay, so let me put it like this. When you're writing SQL, right, you use SQL syntax to write your SQL to make query, right? And you write your SQL syntax to also create the schema. But you don't want to also write those raw SQL queries and those raw SQL syntax on your project. Let's say on your SQL, on your back end, okay? You don't write that directly on your back end. Rather, you want a library that allows you to naturally call the data you want from the back end without writing your raw query into your back end. So there is what is called an ORM or an ODM, which is like a bridge between your API, that's your API or your back end and the database. Okay. It's like it's an ORM or an ODM allows your API to interact or talk with the database directly, right? Then ORMs are used for relational database, while ODMs are used for non-relational databases or non-SQL databases. So Mongoose is an example of an ODM. SQLize is an example of an ORM. Prisma is an example of an ODM stroke and ORM because you can use Prisma with structured query languages, which is SQL, or MongoDB, which is not a structured query language. So we've installed Mongoose. The next thing we want to do is we want to create what is called a schema. So the schema is what is required in MongoDB to give a structure to what you want to save on your database. Remember that the database is not actually aware of this structure or this schema you want to write now. The database is just your schema that you want to write now is just going to enforce a structure on your application, not on the database directly. So if you go to the database and you edit anything you want to edit manually there, it will save it. Okay, so let's do this. So first you create a schema. Then inside the schema folder, you create a file. Then the file name would be to do .ts. Oh, sorry, JS. Sorry, my bad. Then you say const mongoose should be equals to require mongoose. Remember that is how you import, and it's a an internal, or it's a package. Mongoose is a package you install, so you now use // to try to import it, like using relative imports. When you say something like // or maybe //, you're doing what is called like relative imports. So you're trying to import relative to the file or folder you're inside, you're currently at. So, but if you just write mongoose like this, it will understand that if you're referring to a package somewhere in your node modules folder. Another thing I didn't mention is, apart from doing git ignore, right, on your .env and .rest and .http, remember to also do it for node modules. It is not, um it's not proper to push node modules to GitHub. Okay, it's not proper to do so. So once you do that, the next thing you want to do is you say const. Now you're declaring the schema. Schema should be equals to new mongoose.schema. And then this schema, you start declaring what you want. So now, what did we? Let's come back here and see what we try to do now to do controller. So to do should have an ID, a title, and a description, right? And it's done is supposed to be false. So let's see how we can transcribe this to how our schema should look. Now, there's no need for you to declare an ID in your schema because it will always be created for every record you save on your database using Mongoose. That's how it works. So you say, right? And that's how it is on Mongo. As far as you're trying to save a document using Mongo, it will create an ID for it. Except, I think they said to specify an ID. But if you don't specify it, will automatically create an ID for whatever you save. So we'll say title would be title will have a type. Title will have a type of string required true. So what we are saying is the title here would be a string type, right? And it is required. So if you don't specify a title, it won't work. It won't save the file. Then you say description type of string required true. Then the next thing you want to do is, I like doing this a lot, and it's important. You say timestamp is true. What you've said here is each time you save or you update any record on your database, there will always be a created and updated time stamp, right? Which will automatically, so instead of you, which will automatically update. So instead of you coming to say created at, then you now say new date, something like this, new date or date.now. No? Rather than do that, there's no need for this because MongoDB will do that automatically for you because you said timestamp should be true. Okay, so we just have a schema now, right? And remember that I said the schema is used to enforce structure, right? Well, on MongoDB now, this schema is only used on the application level. The database is not aware of this schema. But if you're using something like Postgres or SQL, when you finish writing your schema, you migrate it so that the schema you have on your application and the schema on the database would match. The next thing is to create a model. So you can say to do model equals to mongoose.model. And then the first thing you want to write here is the model name, which is to do. And this is always supposed to be in plural, right? So even if I name it as to do, when once I start using, or when once this collection is being created on the database, it will change this name to to-dos, and I'll show you. But let me name it as to-dos. It's supposed to always be in plural. If you don't make it plural to be converted to plural, then the next thing is you want to pass a schema which you created, which is this schema here you created. So you now say schema. Remember, the name you're using here should be the name you're using here. Then the next thing you want to do is you want to export this model, because this model is what you will be using to interact with a collection. So now let's go back. For people that probably have written databases before, a Postgres database, for example, or an SQL database has record, has entity, has table, right? So a table of users, and it can contain records and the record of a particular user with different entities. With MongoDB, it's different. You have a database with a collection, not table. So table in SQL, collection in NoSQL. Then you have records in your SQL. In your NoSQL, you have what is called documents. And then you have entities in your NoSQL, in your SQL, and then in your NoSQL, you have what's called properties of that document. Okay. So for people that understand, right, you know what I mean, but if you don't understand it, no problem. You understand it better by and by. Okay, so let's see. We'll say model.export equals to do model, because that's what you want to export, to do model. Okay, now we've created this. Remember, we wrote our schema, then we created a model. So creating this model will also create the collection on our database once we try to save our first document, or once we start and connect to the server, right? Or connect to the Mongo database. So now, after writing this, right? Or before writing this, any way you want to do it, make sure you connect your database and you do it anywhere here. You can do it anywhere here. For example, I would now say, I want to write a script to connect to the database, because writing the schema there doesn't actually mean anything. And if your database is not connected, or your backend is not connected to the database, so you say const mongo or mongoose. You need to call it mongoose. Require mongoose. Then here we say mongoose. Okay. Yeah. Let me do this. I'll say mongoose dot connect. So connect accepts a URL to the database. So MongoDB, if it was a Mongo Atlas, to be MongoDB plus SRV, something like that. But since it is, well, I want to connect to my local MongoDB. That's the one I installed on my PC, and I know you guys installed. Let's say MongoDB // localhost colon 27017 / I'd say to do test DB. Now, this part is the name of the database. This is where the database is hosted, and the database doesn't use HTTP. It uses this MongoDB um protocol, right? So we're not using HTTPS, we're using MongoDB's own protocol. Okay, so we've done that, and then we can now say dot then, because it's a promise. It's a promise that you want to try to connect to the database. So you say dot then, you can take this then to the next line. Okay, let me just allow it to be there. So I'll say dot then. So now this then, I want to say once you're connected, something should happen. Then if I say dot catch, something should happen if there's an error. So I'll say dot then console.log connected to the database. If there's an error while trying to connect, we'll say console.log an error occurred while trying to connect. Then I'll say error. Okay, so this line of code. Now remember what we talked about in one of our classes about denable functions. You said if you're consuming a promise, right? So connect is going to return a promise. See, it's going to. So now most times when you move on these things and it shows you something, try to understand what it's trying to show you. Function connect accepts a URI as its first parameter, and that URI should be a string. Then the next parameter should be connection options. So they said this connection options is actually optional. Then it tells you that it is returning a promise. Now, returning a promise means you can use async await with this, right? You can use async await with this. You can use denable functions the way we've done it this way, right? So this is an example of you consuming a promise. Then the next thing, so let's just run our what we've done so far. Let me save what I've done. Let me come back here and also save what I've done. Let me come back here and run npm run dev. I believe that's, yeah, beautiful. It crashed. So what is it saying? Okay, beautiful. Kingsley, is the protocol correct? Check. Yeah, beautiful. I like it that you guys are looking. So there's MongoDB, not MonoDB. Thank you. Right? So you see, I wouldn't have cleared that. I wouldn't have cleared that. So let's try it again. Let's try it again and see the error. So it shows error. Most of you would have been like, this thing, what is going on with my code? This thing don't tire me. I'm tired of this programming. It's not for me. Read the error first. An error occurred while trying to connect. Mongo parser error. Invalid scheme. Expected connection string to start with MongoDB or MongoDB plus SRV. Now, this thing, what this error message they've written here should tell you something. It should tell you that, did you start with MongoDB or did you start with MongoDB plus SRV? But if you did not read this error now, you just crash your database and go and sit one place and start frowning at PC that did not do anything. So if we change this from Mono to Mongo and we save it, let's see what will happen now. So you see, the server has started on 43,000 and is connected to database now just because of that. Right, then the next thing we want to do is we've declared a schema, we've been able to connect to the database using this particular line of code. you want to now start interacting with the database. So which means here we will not use to do again this way. We will not use to do that way again. Now, there's one thing I like doing when I'm writing my own backend. You can also do it. This is what I like doing. I like wrapping my whole backend in a try and catch. All my controllers, and there's a reason for that. If at any point someone sends a request to the backend and the backend crashes, the server is not going to stop accepting requests till I restart it. It will just show or do something with the error message and continue like continue. Okay. So you can do this, you can say now, how do we interact with our database, our to-do collection? Right? Remember, collection means is also like table. So you then come here and say const to-do model equals to require dot. Now remember you're inside to do controller. If you do dot slash, there's no other file inside the to do controller folder. See it here. There's no other file inside here. So what you now have to do is you now do dot slash. What your dot slash is, take me out of the controller folder to the root. Like take me a folder before or a folder outside this controller. That is, take me to the parent folder that contains this controller folder. That's what I've done now. So that's why I can see everything that is in the parent plus the one I was in. So I'll now say dot slash schema slash shop to do. So with this now, I have imported, or I have imported the to do model. The next thing I want to do is I want to say const to do should be equals to await. Now, this is another place I can do something like, okay, don't worry. I'll explain how callback here works in one of these. I'll explain it. So now, remember that since you want to use await to wait for the to-do model to, because remember that this to-do model would always return a promise at the end of the day. It will always return a promise. Like when you're trying to query the database, right? You don't want querying this database to stop other executions that don't have to do with it from happening. Okay. So if there's another thing that I wanted to do under here, it will just keep doing it as far as it doesn't send this to do model. Once this to do model returns its request, then the result of those execution will now be, should I say, sent out or given. Okay. So you say to do model dot find, just say to do model dot find, right? And since these are, you have an await here, you want to write an assign here. You want to mark that function as an assign function. So with this line of code, you are able to pick the to do, right? You're able to pick all the to do that you need. Then here you could do something like, oh, response.send res.send you could just say error like this, and you say dot status 500. So this one is 500, which means maybe there's an issue somewhere or something that you probably did not catch. So the server is the one that caught it. So you can write this. I'll show you another way of doing it. Then the next one you want to do is when you want to add a new to do, right? So when you want to add a new to do, remember you don't need an ID for now. You don't need to push anywhere, right? You don't need to push anywhere. You just say, yeah, you can say const new to do equals to do model dot create. Now this create accepts an array. If you want to create like 5 to dos at the same time, you can use an array in here. If you want to create just one to do, you just pass the object you want to create. So the title of the to do. So title is the same thing as writing title is equals to title because they are the same. So one of the features of ES6 syntax. Now you guys should read about ES6, ECMAScript 6, right? Now one of the features is shorter names, shorter object names. So instead of having, maybe you have that the title as the key should be this object or this title. Since the two of them are the same name, instead of writing title is equals to title, body is equal, description is equals to description, you can just write title, comma, description. It's the same thing as saying title is equals to title, description is equals to description. Exactly the same thing. So with this, we've created your new to do, and we can return your new to do here. So you can say new to do here. Then, so we've been able to create that to do. Then how do we find a single to do, right? So let's see how we can do that. So once an ID for the to do is specified, we say const to do should be equals to await. Did I await here? No. So assume, sorry, await to do model dot find by ID, because you're finding by ID, and then you pass the ID here. Now, without Mongoose, you see this thing you are doing, you are just writing find by ID, create, all those things. Find. It wouldn't be as easy as this without an ODM. As like, for example, Mongoose, right? It won't be easy to query the database like this. It might be a lot more difficult than writing it this way. But with an ODM, you see how simple it is to query your database, right? And Mongoose also accepts what is called plugins. So you can plug in things. For example, if you want to enable things like soft delete on Mongoose, there's a plugin for soft delete. Now remember I said soft delete happens when you mark a particular data as being deleted, but that data is not deleted. But if the user tries to query for that data, it tells the user that data has been deleted. You know, things like that, things like pagination. If you know, if you have like 500 to do's you want to do, you might not want to load the whole 500 at once. Now you want to be loading it 10 at a time. Then if you go to the next page, it will load at the next 10, like that. So to say to do, come here and say to do. So now what I'll also do is, what if the to do doesn't exist? If there is no to do. So if there is no to do, this to do model is going to return null at its value. So then say rest.status should be call from dot send return.
That's the right of code.
So once you do that, you need to do found. Then the next thing is if you want to update a particular to do, right? To update a particular to do status, you can do this. Okay, now remember. So remember that when we are adding a to do, we do not even specify the schema that is something like to do status. So let's come back here. So we have title and description. We do not say, so we were supposed to say to do status should be a type of string. Should be a type of string. Should have an enum, which is an enumerated values, an enumerated or a list of accepted values. So this can contain, or this can be pending, ongoing, completed. Okay, pending, ongoing, completed. Then there should be a default, right? The default should be pending. Now, why this default? Why this default? Now, this default is important because when you remember when we are trying to save the to-do, we did not specify a to-do status. So as far as the to-do status is not specified, the value is going to be pending. Now, if you're using default, right? There's no need of you to use for you to write something like required again. Required here. There's no need for you to write it because default is saying if you don't specify it, this is the value I'm going to use. Required is saying if you don't specify a value here, I will not accept it. You must specify the value. You must specify that object and give it a value. Okay, and your default should also rhyme with your enum, right? So they should be, for example, I cannot say maybe the default should be an empty string, right? Because an empty string is not in this list of enum, except I did not put any of this enum, except I did not put any of this. Okay, if there was no enum, right? And I said the default should be null, right? Then what will happen is if a particular to-do is created, the default status of that to-do will be null, right? If I just did only like this, that the to-do status should have a type of string. If you don't supply that to-do status, it will not even show up on the database. It will not even show up. But if I said no, then each time you add it to-do, it will always have the default of no if you don't specify the to-do status. But since I specified an enum, which is saying this enum is saying whatever the to-do status is has to be one of these three, or one of what is inside this array. So which means one of them also has to be a default. I hope I'm making sense, so guys. I hope I'm making sense. Beautiful. Now we have pending there. Then the next thing you want to do is you want to come here and say, okay, we've on the to-do schema, we've done that. We come back here to the controller, right? We come back here to the controller. If we specify maybe status to pending, it's okay. If we don't specify it, you know what to do. The next thing we want to do is when we want to update this to do status, we do like this. We come here, we say to do should be equals to await. Remember, this should be an async function. To do await should be to do model dot find by ID. Now let's look at this. There's find by ID, right? There's find one. Now, if you're using find one, it means you want to try to query the database for different criteria. For example, if I want to find someone, or let's say if I want to find a to-do where the title is using HTML, I can say something like find one where the title is equals to using HTML, and maybe the description is equals to something, right? This works when you are using find one, but when you are using find by ID, trying to say that particular ID is what you're looking for, which is ID. Okay. I hope you guys can see me clearly. Hope you guys can see me clearly.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's continue. So I'll say find by ID and update. Find by ID and update. So the first thing you pass there is the ID. And the next thing you are going to pass is what you want to update. Right? And before that, you want to check if that exists, if it really exists. So we can say was to do exists, was to do model find by ID, and then you pass in the ID again. Okay. So you can say something like if does do or does to do exist. So if to do or if to do does not exist, now I want to check if does to do, is it true that to do does not exist? Now, if you make this query and the to do does not exist, what is the value of to do does not exist is going to be null, and null is false, right? So I'm just saying if it is null, then change this from null, which is a false kind of statement, to true. So then I'll say to do res.send to do does not exist. Return. Okay. If it exists, you want to find by ID and you want to update what? You want to update the to do status. So to do status should be equals to is done, which is, so this is done is this one we wrote here. This is done here. Okay. Then we continue. Then the next thing is should be able to delete. Okay. And we'll use this let's deleted to do. Just simply say let's deleted to do equals to await to do model, because this guy needs to have seen. Find by ID and delete. So that's the ID you want to delete. All right. So the moment of truth. First, let us check. Is there anyone that will number pass as an async function? Right? We not call as an async function. So let's come back here. Right? Let's query to get a list of to-dos. You see, it still returns an empty object, right? Let's add a new to-do. Now, do you notice something? When it adds the new to-do, remember that here, after adding the to-do, so that when we add a new to-do, right? We did not specify created at and updated at. We did not specify an ID. We did not specify title and description. Added the rest of the things for us, right? And I'm sure it has sent an email too. Okay. Then let's view the list of to-do again. So let me come here. View a list of to-do. You see? So this is from the database now. This is the list of to-do we have. Let's copy this ID and search for that to-do. So localhost 3000 / to-do / the ID. Send it. Okay, what's this? You cannot get to localhost 3000 HTTP to it. Okay, I think it's /single / to-do. No, did you know? Okay. Okay, don't worry. So we have the to-do found, and then we have the to-do here. Let's try to update. Let's try to update with the ID. So you say hash. Come here, we say what do you want to update again? You say to-do status. Let me try it with something that I did not put in the ending. I'll say invalid. I'll send. You notice? What is it saying? Now it's saying what? Okay, saying title is required. Okay, this is because I use post, sorry. Let me use put. You need put or patch. Let's come back here and show. So to update, okay, let's go to our router. To update, we use patch. So we are coming here to use patch. Okay, so let me just do it as, or make it as invalid and try to send. Do you notice that it says something here? Okay, let me restart so that we would see it clearly. Okay. Okay, so what is it saying? Task object field for this is this to do ID. Object ID for task object ID field for to use part ID to use. So let that fast error. Okay, I think it's because let me restart again to be sure. Okay, yeah. So now that we restarted, let us send that request. So you notice past object ID field for value to do. Okay. Part this is ID to use. Okay. I think I understand why. This is supposed to be / to do / the ID we are trying to update. So let me copy this ID. Remember that this ID is the ID of this particular one we just added. So this would be / ID / the ID itself. Right? Let's check here if we are correct. So okay, patch to just / ID, not to do just / ID. That's / to do / ID. We'll come back here. So / to do / the ID. Let me send that again. It's going to send. Okay, so right? It's saying to do updated successfully, but let's come back and check here. It has not changed anything actually, right? It has not changed anything actually, but it's telling you it updated successfully. Even if we try it again, saying to do updated successfully. Let's see why that is so. It's right. Schema. So this is not showing an error. And I'll show you how you can actually catch this kind of error. If if the um if the database or if the schema can't catch this kind of error, there's a way to actually still catch them by doing what's called object validation or form validation. I'll show you how to do it. Okay, so let's come back here. Let's come back to our test. So first, it doesn't update. Even if it says it's updated successfully, it didn't actually update and it's not showing any error to that. We are going to see how we can solve that. Then if we change this from invalid to maybe completed, if you make that request, it will still show you status of pending. But if you come back here and you make that request, okay, still showing a status of pending, still showing a status of pending. Let's come back here. So /to/the ID is a patch request. Then let's come here. Let's come here. Updating it to do does not exist. To do find by ID and update. Okay, then ID, then we say that to do status. Let me be sure. Oh, okay. I understand. This is done is not what we are returning. We are returning to do status instead of is done. If you guys followed, we are supposed to send is done as in the request body, not to do status. So I'm supposed to send is done here. So let me do that invalid again. Let's just do that. Well, oh wow. What it's actually updated. Okay. I'll show you how we can actually trap that or we can actually stop that from happening. Okay. But for now, we can change this to completed. Can change that to completed. And if you notice, okay, let me change it to pending now and again. If I send that request, it still returns completed, which is the old form, right? But this is what you can do to avoid that. You can do something. So when you update, after updating, you want to write something that you always want the new or updated version of what you want to send to the user. So you can do something like new should be true. New should be true. Okay. So that new of true is going to make sure that when you've updated and you're sending this to you back to the user, it will be the updated to do, not the old one. So if you try now, pending, if you try completed, it will show completed, right? Then the next one is deleting. So deleting is simple. Just copy this whole part and you place your triple hash, paste it there, and you say delete. So it tells you that this is the one that has been deleted. If you try to get it not to be found, if you try to get a list of to do, you see that the to do is empty. Now let's address this. This is completed. Okay. Now there is a tool or a package named Joy, right? There's a package named Joy, and There are three of them actually you can use for what is called form validation, right? So for you to prove that a form is valid before you can then send it to your database, you can write a form validation um, function, right? And you can decide to do it manually if you have strength, or you can use a library. So the three libraries that are there, popular libraries is Joy, J-O-I, Zop, and Yup, Y-U-P. My favorite to use amongst them is Joy, second to Zop, third to Yup. Actually, I haven't even used Yup before, but I've used Zop, right? And I've used Joy, and I prefer using Joy every time. And I'll just use form validation for only this update status because I don't like the fact that my update status can change to anything entirely. So I'll do this. All right, npm install Joy. And you can go through Joy's documentation. If you just type Joy npm on your Google and you search it, you'll see a comprehensive documentation on how Joy works. Okay, so what is it saying? Now let me make this small letter Joy. Small letter J for the Joy. Okay, it installs, right? Then I'll say const Joy should be equals to require Joy. Oh, sorry, require Joy. Right? Then here on is done, I'll say const okay. Okay, no problem. So you can say const value or const schema. That schema for form validation should be equals to Joy Joy dot Joy dot is done. I'm sorry, Joy dot boolean dot required. Then the next thing you want to say is const objects equals to schema dot validate. Then you want to say you want to validate if you want to validate is done. Now you say if, oh sorry, is done is not actually a boolean, is done is a string. But the string will say it should be valid. I can't remember. Yes, valid. So valid takes in okay. Valid should take in a string. Okay, and okay, yeah. Sure. So valid would be the same thing you put there on your schema. Pending, let me remove this side. Pending, ongoing, completed. Those three, you now say if, so you just write error here. You now say if there is an error, if there is an error that exists, right? If an error exists, then you now say res dot status of 422. 422 is saying unprocessable entry. I cannot process what you're trying to give me or what you've given me so far. Dot send. Then the send here would say message. That the message should be error.message. Then remember to add your return statement so that this return will prevent the code from running after executing the if statement. So if we do that and we come back here to our app.js, we add a new to do, of course, we get that to do, right? Maybe we can get it by ID, and then we try to update it. So let's try to update it with this done of invalid. Right? So you see, it tells you value must be one of pending, ongoing, or computed. It tells you, no, we don't accept that here, right? We don't do that here. Don't mention, we don't do that here. Okay? It tells you it has to be one of those three. And you can also customize your message. So customizing your message, where is it? You can customize your message in this way. You say dot messages. And then inside these messages to take an object. So you say string dot valid. You say is done can only take so I have to change, so I have to escape these ones. Where is it now? Oh, my keyboard is playing hide and seek with me. Where is it? Sorry, it's supposed to be at the beginning. What's going on? It's like I'll mark this book. So sorry, it's actually kind of dark there. I'm sorry about that. So let me trace it again. So what I'm doing is I'm escaping those strings. I'm escaping them. Okay, so some people might be like, what have I done so far? No, what I've done so far is this pending, right? Remember that we started our string with double quotes. And if you have a double quote string, you can't have double quotes inside that string, except you're concatenating, right? So if you started with double quotes, you have to, and you want to quote something inside your that string, you use single quotes. But what if you start with double quotes and you want to still include double quotes? You have two options. It's either you change your double quotes to single quotes, or before the double quotes inside your string, you escape it with a backslash. So let's see how this works. I've saved it and I've saved that file, and then I come back here to make that request again. So let's make the request again. Okay. So why is the message still the same? Is any dot valid? Can't really remember the syntax currently. Wow. Um, so I can't remember. It's one of these. If it's valid, it's supposed to be string as valid. This string as valid. Oh, so wait. Let me try string as valid. I can't actually remember the syntax for that. Now, if you go to that documentation, you should see it. Ah, so those are not working actually, right? I'll I'll check for that uh variant. Bring it up in the next place. Yeah, so messages is used if you want to return multiple errors. For example, if you're checking that if you want to be able to return different error, maybe if it's valid, if it's a particular length, if it is does it contain space, all those things like that. You want to be able to list all the messages out, right? After doing your validation, you use messages. Okay. So at least what we've done so far is we've been able to stop this stop is done from being updated if the value we provide is done is not the actual value that the database should accept. Okay, so we can do this. We can search for how to use custom messages, right? We can search on how to use custom messages. So let me just keep it simple that way. Yes, and then if we send that request, it's still going to be the same. So let's move on. Let's move on. Now we've been able to do all these things, right? And if you check your MongoDB compass, right, you should see the database there, right? You should see the database we created and everything. But let's move on to authentication and see how we can implement authentication. So from what I've done so far, is there any question? Do you guys understand? Do you guys follow? Is there anybody that doesn't understand what I did? Okay, so now let's move on to JWT, right? JSON with tokens. And let's see how that works. So first, I want to go to their website. So just give me a little bit of time. I'll still share my browser for you guys to see where I am. What's it doing for this one? JWT.org. I think it's .org or .io. Okay, JWT.io. Beautiful. So let me reshare my screen. Let me reshare my screen so you guys will see. Okay, so we are here finally. So JWT, JWT stands for JSON with token, and it's a token that is mainly used for authentication, right? And what makes JWT different from encryption decryption is that with JWT, you can still see the payload of the payload for that particular JWT. Someone said the first one was Jehovah's Witness website. Okay, so one thing with JWT is you can always find you can always see the payload for the JWT, right? You can always see it, but only the backend can prove if that payload is valid, if it has expired or not. Only the backend can prove it, and it's the backend that has the key to use to prove if a token is valid or not, or if a token is expired or not. Right? Okay, you can also even see if the token is expired from your end, from the front end. So now let's look at it. JWTs are actually tokens, right? And they have three parts. So this first part is the header part. So whatever you write here, and this header part contains things like the algorithm that is used to create the JWT, the type of token, if it's a JWT token, if it's another kind of token. Then this other part, notice that the parts are separated by full stop. So this other part now represents this body, the claim table, or sorry, the payload, right? So this payload is what you, as the person that is creating that JWT, defines. So you define that, and this JWT should carry the ID of this user, and this JWT should define this, and this JWT should define that, and all this stuff like that. Right? Now, there are other things that are also going to be added to this JWT. For example, this I80 represents the time at which that JWT was created or issued. Okay? This sub also refers to whom, right? The subject to whom the token refers to, whatever that means. I've not actually used this, but it has an information in it, which is important. You can read about what that means, the subject. Then most times it's usually like there's an expiry date, which you will specify, right? If you don't specify an expiry date, it will not be added to the payload for your JWT. And it's important to have an expiry date in a JWT because we don't want a JWT that will last forever and ever and always be valid forever and ever, right? If you have a JWT that is valid forever and ever and an attacker steals that JWT, that person can pretend to be who you assign that JWT to. For example, you log into a particular website, I now come and I come to your system, go and trace where your JWT file is saved on your browser, copy it, go to my browser, save it the same way it was saved on your own PC, and then visit that same website. There is a very high possibility that it's going to load your own account on my PC, right? That's why the ultimate way to not get hacked is not to even give it a chance. That's why they say you should hold your device well. You should not give anybody. You should not hold your laptop. Don't share your laptop with anybody. Don't share your phone with anybody. Because even if you feel that you know the password, there are other ways that people can actually get to your account or get things from you without you knowing. Okay? And you will not, the worst of it is that you will not have anybody to suspect at the end of the day that, oh, it should be this person. Because the highest you might know is you gave your son your laptop, but the person doesn't know the password to any of your things. But then it's done. What's law? Anyways, let's continue. Then this third part. So this third part here that you're seeing is the signature for that JWT. And that signature is used to prove if that JWT is authentic or not. So if you say, oh, so I can see the the body or the JSON, the payload for this particular JWT, I can go ahead and try to edit it. No problem. It's fine. Edit it. As you're editing it, just know that the back end or the signature, right, will also change. And then the signature will not match the original one, right? And when the backend is trying to verify your modified JWT, the backend will reject it because the signatures don't match, even if the JWT looks legit. So you can use JWT to create a payload of a particular user that is logged in. So when you log into a website, as you log in, right, what happens before you arrive at your home page on that website is that your browser or your phone is assigned a token. Sometimes it comes as two tokens, a refresh token and an access token. It's given to your device. And anytime your device wants to make a request to the back end to a protected resource, it is that JWT that the back end uses to know that, okay, it is this particular person that's making this request, because that JWT contains information about who is sending the request. And even if this JWT contains like your email and your ID, right? Even if it contains those two things, you can't, even if you know the ID of someone, the database ID of someone, what can you use it for, right? You can't use it to log in as that user or something. The only time you can attack someone is if you know, the only time you can attack a particular website easily is if you can get access to the JWT for the person you want to attack, or you have the secret key for that platform. You have the secret key of that platform, then you can now use that secret key to create JWTs for yourself. And then the back end would since the backend is also using that same key to verify, that's when the backend can now know that, that's when the backend would think is actually a legit JWT, not knowing that you're creating your own by yourself. Okay, so I've said a whole lot about that. Let's go back to coding, because it's 80% coding, 20% talking. Let's come back here. And so let me share again. So we are back here. And let's see. How do we even do this thing in the first place? The first thing we need to do is install JSON Web Token. And there are very plenty algorithms used for JWT. There are very plenty of them, right? I didn't even go through the algorithms parts, but if you go to the libraries and algorithms part of the website we've viewed before, in fact, I think we should go there actually. I don't want to go there. Maybe we should go there, right? All right, so we are here finally. Libraries for token assigning to verification. So there are plenty of them generated for different languages, right? And you can see what some allows you to do. So this one is for .NET. It allows you to sign, verify, it allows you to check for the expiry date, check for the issue date, check for the subject and all these other ones. This other one doesn't have this JTI, it doesn't support this algorithm. So see the algorithms you can use for your signing and verifying your JWT. These are like algorithms you can use for them. So you can scroll down till you get to JavaScript parts, right? And then you see how it works. You see the algorithms you can use. So let's come back here. Then first, let's create a register route. Let's create a register route. Before we create a register route, we should create a new to-do schema, or we should create a new schema for users, right? so that to create a collection or model for new users. So I'll do this. I'll say schema new file. I'll say users.js. You can call this users or users model or user model anyhow, or user model, right? Be consistent with your naming. So Mongo should be equals to require mongoose. Then we'll say schema should be equals to mongoose.schema. Of course, don't forget the new keyword. Mongoose.schema, the schema will have full name as type of string. With capital S, because this string is different. Required, not require, or required true. Which one is this one? Required of true. I want to do the same thing for email and password. And then say timestamp true. Const long const user model should be equals to, or you could call it user collection because it's actually a collection. That's how it's supposed to be named. Sorry, I'm using user model, but it's supposed to be user collection. Right? So user collection or user model, anyone should be equals to mongoose.model, and this would be users. Then this would be skill. Module.export equals to user model. Then what's the next thing we want to do? We want to create a route for users. So I said /to-do is for to-do route. This to-do route, which is this one. So I'll create a user route, right? So this is the thing. Adaobi, you're asking, is there any way to do email and password validation, or should be done on front end? Of course, you can use Joy to do your validation on back end. So now, sorry, don't trust the front end to validate the users. In fact, it should be form validation should be done on both front end and back end, right? So whether the front end does it or they don't, do it on your back end. The reason is because it's not everybody that is going to be using your API from the front end. Some people might use it on a mobile app that is not doing validation. Some people might be querying the API directly. Okay. So I believe I've answered your question. You should do it on the back end, whether the front end does it or not. So the next thing you want to do, most times, right? Most times you need to have a router folder, and then you have this router file inside your router folder, rather than just keeping it outside there. So you move that, and once I move it, what Express does for, or what the VS Code does for me, it renames all my imports. For example, it renames my import of to-do router here to router /router instead of me manually going to rename them. It automatically renames them for me. So the next thing I want to do is I want to create a new file here. I'll call it user router.js. So this user router.js, I'll just do const express should be equals to via express. Then router should be equals to express.router. Then export the router. Export the router. Then the next thing you need to do is you then say router.post for register. Router.post for login. I guess we'll do this too before we call it a day. Right? After doing that, the next thing you want to do is you come here and you create another middleware to handle that. So you want to come here and say const user router should be equals to via /router / user router. And then here you're going to say app.use say / auth. Then you say user, or I think I should call it auth router, not user router. Auth router, right? So auth, then here you have your register and you have your login. Then we'll create another controller. We'll call it auth controller.js. Right? Then inside this auth controller, we'll just say register should be equals to or you can use arrow functions. I mean, I don't like using arrow functions here. I'll just say function register should be equals to async req res. I'll still show you another way that people used to write this thing. So you could say, so if it's a normal function, you say async before the name of the function. Yeah, like async then function before the name of the function. So register, you want to say const. So this is what I like doing. Say const, that should be equals to req.pod. Instead of me writing full name should be equals to req.body.fullname. Email should be equals to req.body.email and the rest. And structuring it here. So I'm saying full name, email, password. Right? This thing I've done here is actually the same thing as saying const full name should be equals to req.body.full name. Then you still say const email should be equals to array.this.email. Like instead of me writing it this way, right, one by one, I can just say the properties inside there and destructuring it out of the request.body. Destructuring is also another AS6 feature or property. No, I'll say feature, so you can actually read about it. So you would say the next thing you would want to do is you would want to import your schema. Okay, so you say user should be equals to or require dot slash node schema / user schema. You just call it user, or you can call it user collection. But since I started with model, you call it user model because variable naming matters. So you would want to first, you want it that email should be unique. So you want to say something like const email exists equals to await user model dot find by ID then, oh sorry, find one, because it's one I want to find, where the email is the email. Remember I said that if you have that the key and the value is the same name, you can just write email like that, where the email is that email. Right, then you would want to say something like this. You want to say if email exists, if email exists, if email exists, right, then you want to send a I've forgotten the status code. So there's a status code for duplicates. It's 4 or something. I can't remember now. Let me just do it as 400, but there's a one for conflicts. I can't remember the status code now. So you can send a message saying email already exists. Then remember to return. Okay. Then the next thing you want to do is, since the email doesn't exist, you want to register that user. But remember, you need to hash the password. And there's a library to hash password called bcrypt. So you'd say npm install bcrypt. So remember what I talked about hashing, that when you hash, you cannot unhash. That is the algorithm that compares the plain value with the hash value to see if they match. If they don't match, the algorithm or the package will tell you that they don't match. So then you come here and say const bcrypt should be equals to require dot slash, or not dot slash, so you say bcrypt. It is going to pick it up automatically. So bcrypt. So what you're going to do is you're going to say hashed password should be equals to bcrypt dot hash sync. So hash sync collects two data. It collects the data you want to hash and the rounds. I think it's the rounds or the salt that you want to use, right? So what is that round? So the round specified in number. Okay, what they say, the salt can be used as the hash to the used to hash the password. It's if specified as a number, then a salt will be generated with a specified number of rounds and used. So what they mean here is, if you pass a string as a salt, it's going to use that salt as kind of a key to hash and unhash. But if you provide a number for these salt rounds, it's going to generate a random salt, and it's going to use the number of rounds you say here to hash with that salt. So what does that even mean in the first place? So if you pass a number 5, for example, what is going to happen is the backend is going to generate a salt, and then it is going to use that salt to hash the data you want to hash. Then the result of that data is going to hash it the second time with the same sort. Then the result of hashing it the second time will be hashed the third time. Then the result of that third time will hash the fourth time. Then the result of hashing it the fourth time will be hashed the fifth time. It happens automatically, right? So I'll just say password here is, so what I want to hash here first is the data, which is the password. Then the next thing I want to hash here is, or the next thing I want to provide is the round. And I want it to hash 10 times. So before you can unhash this password, you unhash the first time. When you get the result, you unhash again the second time. When you get the result, you unhash the third time till you do it 10 times. Because I want to stress people that I want to unhash it. So then I want to save what I've done so far. So I then want to say, await await what user model dot create, and then I want to create a user with that full name, with that email that exists only once, and with the password. The value of the password will be the hashed password. Remember, you don't save password in plain text on your database. You save the hashed value, right? Then the next thing is you want to respond with your users, telling them message, then you say user created successfully. Then remember that the status is going to be 201. So I'm still thinking about this. This should be, I think it should be 409, if I'm not mistaken. It should be 409. 409 should be conflict. Okay. So once you do that, you respond with a 201 that the user has been created successfully. And I think we should test what we've done so far. Let's log in. We'll do in our next class, but let's test register. So I'll say const user or auth controller should be equals to require dot slash controller slash auth controller. And I'll say the controller for that will be auth controller dot. Okay, now why is it not exporting? We did not export anything from here. So we'll then say module.export equals to an object which should contain register, which is what we are exporting. So we say register auth controller dot, now it shows register because we've exported that. Then let's start up this server. Let's start up that server. What is it saying now? So argument header must be a function. Argument header must be a function in router index. Okay. So where is this coming from? Where is this coming from? Argument handler must be a function. Okay. Okay, it's actually coming from here. Coming from here. So I don't know. I don't know. So we've written register here, async function, this. We've exported register as a function. Come here to user routes. We said auth.register. For the router, we export it. Oh, module.export. Sorry, my bad. So you see, if you don't read your code again, you would not understand it. So then let's come here and then let's say, so remember that it is at /auth/register and is a post request. So we come here, I'll just copy this down, come here, hash, hash, hash. It's a post request to /auth/register. Say username, sorry, full name, uh, so meter, email, okay, thank you, Kingsley. Email could be cookupjunior@gmail.com. Password should be whatever post. So what is he saying now? Auth controller, this. He's saying find one is not a function. Okay. So let's see, find one is not a function. Let's come back here. Okay, we didn't save this. We didn't save the schema. So let's come back and try again. See, user created successfully. And if there is a route to get users, I think I should just open the database. Compass. Let me open the database so we can see what we are doing or what we've done so far. Remember that the name of the database, where is it? From this app.js where we connected it, the name of the database is to do test DB. So we're actually going to go there. We're going to do test DB to check what we've done. Okay. So while to do test DB is coming up. Okay, it has come up. So can you guys still hear me? Okay, so let me share it again. And let's come here. Let's come to the local DB first. You click connect for your local connection. Then let's scroll down to to do test DB. Let's expand it. You see that we have to do's, which has one. Then let's come to users. Now if you come to users, you see that full name has been saved, email has been saved, password. This is not the password we put, but this password was hashed, and this is the value. It was hashed 10 times, and this is the value after the 10th hash. Then we have created and updated at. So we are going to do, or we are going to do the login part in our next class too. We are going to see how we can also do the login part in our next class. Okay. I hope there is no question for this particular class. Is there any question? Okay. So since there's no question for now, thank you and see you in the next class.